The man is driving. In the next second, what kind of beast could overturn a 5-ton car, with a tremendous noise that instantly spread several kilometers away? Debbie and her family were camping in the suburbs when they heard a commotion. After waiting a long time without seeing Bernie return, Debbie grew worried that something had happened to the kid's uncle. She decided to send her husband Bruce to check on him. As the future son-in-law, Robert reluctantly went along. Fortunately, Bernie wasn't seriously injured. He noticed that the side of the car that was hit was covered in hair, but the door was so badly deformed that it wouldn't open. In frustration, he had to kick the door open with his feet. He got out of the car furiously, but didn't see any trace of the beast. In his rage, he quickly strapped a 0.5-meter steel knife to his waist and grabbed a shotgun. Bernie then poured a box of bullets into his hand and swiftly loaded the magazine. In all his life, no one had dared to attack him like this, let alone an animal. He then went off to find the beast and take revenge. Meanwhile, Robert and Bruce were on their way to find Bernie. Robert took the opportunity to discuss the bride price with Bruce. After some discussion, Robert wanted to negotiate, which led to some unpleasantness. At this moment, the wild boar was hiding behind a nearby tree. Seeing the wild boar appear, Robert and Bruce were frozen with fear. Suddenly, Robert pushed Bruce to the ground and then turned and ran. The wild boar immediately grabbed Bruce in its mouth. By the time Bernie arrived with his gun, he was horrified to find Bruce had been torn to pieces by the boar king. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and fired. However, the boar king, with its thick skin, roared a few times in shock and then fled the scene. From a distance, Robert shouted to his girlfriend Ella to run, but the distance was too far, and Ella couldn't hear what Robert was saying. But seeing her boyfriend's fall, Ella was still gloating. She felt very funny. Debbie saw that only Robert had returned and didn't know what had happened. She hurriedly asked Robert why Bruce hadn't come back.
There's a wild pig!
Poor bugger's scared of a wild pig.
Where is Bruce?
Robert said that Bruce had been eaten by the wild boar. The family thought Robert was joking, but in the next second, they were scared out of their wits. In the blink of an eye, the boar king had grabbed Robert and disappeared. Ella found it hard to accept and fell to the ground crying in pain. At this moment, Ella's uncle Bernie arrived quickly. The situation was urgent, so he handed the shotgun to his nephew Bart and then hurriedly picked up Ella and ran in the opposite direction. The family was already scared out of their minds. Bernie, worried that the boar king might suddenly return, led them across the river to the farm on the other side. But without the help of a vehicle, they didn't make it out of the farm by nightfall. At this point, the boar king had also secretly entered the farm and eaten 20 sheep. The farmer heard the commotion and quickly ran out to find the source of the noise. He vaguely saw a beast in the dark gnawing on his dog. Seeing that terrifying scene, he didn't dare to approach rashly and could only shout loudly in an attempt to scare the beast away. It had no effect and instead angered the beast. While the wild boar was tearing at the wire fence, the farmer didn't notice that the wire had suddenly wrapped around his leg. The pain was excruciating. Finally, he endured the pain and barely managed to free himself from the wire. Then, he crawled forward with difficulty. He had just tried to struggle to his feet, but it was too late. The boar king was already behind him. The man turned his head to look. A boar as big as an elephant, baring its fangs. Before he could react, the unfortunate farmer was ruthlessly dragged into the darkness by the boar king. In the distance, Ryan and Hannah rest in their camping tent. Ryan, feeling the urgent need to relieve himself, stepped outside. In the next second, Ryan's painful screams echoed through the air. Hannah was completely unaware of the danger approaching.
Ryan, don't be an ass! It isn't funny.
At first, she thought it was a prank by Ryan, but as she listened, she felt something was wrong. Hannah cautiously opened the tent and saw Ryan's broken body. This horrifying scene made Hannah scream uncontrollably. Not knowing what to do, the wild boar did not leave. It charged into the tent. In this secluded prairie, Hannah's screams were particularly piercing. Two old men camping nearby quickly heard the distant screams and raised their shotguns to check. Ken spotted a giant wild boar and thought he had drunk too much because he had never seen such a big boar. So, Ken handed the shotgun to Blue for him to check. But Blue was also terrified. He saw a boar as big as a van gnawing on a corpse, weighing around 1,000 kilograms. Scared, Blue quickly pulled the trigger, but due to poor eyesight, he didn't hit the boar. When Blue was about to fire a second shot, the boar king, startled by the gunfire, had already disappeared. To understand the situation, Ken and Blue hurried to where the boar had been and found that the couple had been gnawed beyond recognition, with human body parts scattered everywhere. From the number of tents at the scene, it seemed there were originally 4 people camping here, but only 2 bodies were found. To find the remaining 2 people, Ken and Blue decided to split up. One would return to town for help, while the other would search the area for any survivors. But halfway back to town, Blue kept hearing strange growls around him. He turned around to see a bloodthirsty giant boar staring at him. Blue knew he was now considered prey by the boar. He had no choice but to curse at the Boar King. Trying to ease his tension, Blue then picked up a 10-meter-long stick, ready to fight back, but the Boar King lunged at him, and that was the end of Blue. Elsewhere, a young couple was telling horror stories deep in the woods. Just then, the boyfriend clearly heard the sound of the boar. He used his flashlight to track the noise but saw nothing. When he turned around, he found that his girlfriend had been gored by the boar. The terrifying tusks had pierced through her mouth, scaring him to death, but he couldn't escape either. Hearing the screams, Ken rushed over but found the young couple already dead. Strangely, they hadn't been eaten. Could the boar have already been full? But Ken never expected that he had been outsmarted by the boar. A wild Boar King with sharp tusks suddenly burst out of the darkness, charging at him. Ken was completely furious. He pulled out a knife, ready to fight the Boar King. The Boar King opened its terrifying bloody mouth, and with a snort, Ken was also devoured by the Boar King. You've never seen a Boar King like this. It weighs 1,000 kilograms and is the pinnacle of the boar world. It's like a fortress, with a massive and solid body, strong limbs that seem to hold infinite power, especially its pair of sharp tusks, which are its deadly weapons. Once it launches a fierce attack, the power is not to be underestimated. What is most astonishing is the Boar King's skin, which is almost as tough as bulletproof armor. In the jungle, this Boar King is the king of all beasts, almost invincible. Even tigers bow down and avoid the Boar King. What's even more terrifying is that this ferocious Boar King preys on humans. The family was driven to madness by fear, fleeing for their lives even at night, never daring to rest for a moment, constantly searching for a way out of the jungle. Debbie and her daughter followed Bernie, nervously looking around, while Bart calmly trailed behind them. The Boar King followed their scent, closely watching them from the nearby grass. Suddenly, the Boar King snorted, startling them into a panic. Bernie reacted quickly, urgently pulling the mother and daughter to start running. In the chaos, Bart, running at the back, accidentally tripped and fell to the ground. They immediately stopped and looked back. The Boar King had already reached Bart's side, and everyone was too scared to move. In a critical moment, Debbie comforted her son, telling him not to move. The Boar King bit Bart's leg and then sprinted off. Debbie could only watch helplessly as Bart was dragged away by the Boar King. Unable to do anything, she collapsed in agony, refusing to leave. Bernie had no choice but to drag Debbie and Ella along, continuing their desperate escape. During the flight, Debbie was still in the depths of her sorrow. In less than a day, 3 of her loved ones had all fallen to the tusks of the Boar King. No one could bear such a blow. What could they do now that things had come to this point? Their only option was to keep running for their lives. Eventually, they crossed mountains and ridges and finally found a dilapidated cabin where they could hide for a while. Once inside, Bernie hurriedly locked the wooden door. At this moment, Debbie and Ella were on the verge of collapse. Debbie had lost her husband and son. Ella had lost her boyfriend. Seeing this, Bernie kindly approached to comfort his sister, but Debbie blamed Bernie for the death of her son. She kept berating her brother, saying that despite his size, he couldn't even save his own nephew. Bernie felt deeply guilty and didn't know what to say. He hadn't anticipated that the boar's skin would be so tough that even bullets couldn't penetrate it. Even if he had tried to save Bart, he might not have succeeded and could have lost his own life as well. By midnight, Debbie and Ella were shivering from the cold. There was a pile of dry wood in front of the door, so Bernie decided to go out and fetch some for a fire to keep them warm. But the moment he opened the door, the Boar King launched an attack without hesitation. In the critical moment, Bernie didn't falter this time. He pulled out a knife and slashed at the boar. To protect his family, Bernie took on the responsibility of a man, bravely fighting the Boar King. The Boar King staggered back, momentarily stunned by Bernie's fierce assault. Debbie and Ella took the opportunity to run out of the cabin and hide behind Bernie. Bernie told Debbie and Ella to run while he stayed behind to hold off the boar. He launched another attack on the Boar King, trying to buy enough time for Debbie and Ella to escape. But by this time, the Boar King had regained its senses. It charged at Bernie, knocking him to the ground. Bernie's steel knife fell to the ground. Before Bernie could pick up the knife, the Boar King stepped on it. Furious, Bernie swung his fists at the Boar King. Unfortunately, He was no match for the boar king and was impaled by its sharp tusks. The boar king then rammed Bernie into the small cabin, pinning him to the ground and repeatedly charging at him. Finally, using every ounce of his strength, Bernie managed to free himself and stand up. He quickly grabbed nearby items to fight back, hurling them at the boar king, but to no avail. He then spotted a shovel and charged forward with it, but Bernie slipped and fell directly under the boar king. The boar king pinned Bernie down with its hoof, leaving him unable to move. Debbie and Ella, although they had escaped, were still trapped on the dark prairie. They were exhausted, cold, and hungry. To prevent another attack from the boar king, Debbie and Ella lit bonfires around them, hoping to deter the beast. They also fashioned torches from cloth strips to keep the boar at bay. But when Debbie looked up, she saw the boar king with its bloody mouth wide open, suddenly appearing before them. Debbie and Ella were terrified, shaking with fear. The bonfires not only failed to keep the boar king away, but the flames had also attracted it. Debbie and Ella didn't know what to do, so they desperately waved their torches to fend off the boar king's attacks. The boar king, unfazed by the small flames, was further enraged. It directly knocked them to the ground with its snout. Even Ella's thigh was caught in the boar king's mouth. In a life-or-death moment, Debbie and Ella could only punch the boar king's head as hard as they could, but that was just scratching an itch for the boar king. Just as Debbie and Ella thought they were about to die, a blinding light suddenly shone from a distance, giving them a chance to escape. A pickup truck then sped down a slope and heavily rammed into the boar king, sending it flying. It was Ken's daughter, Sasha. Since Ken and Bernie hadn't returned, Sasha drove out to look for them and witnessed this terrifying scene. The boar king, now with a broken back, was lying on the ground, struggling to survive. An enraged Debbie quickly grabbed a shotgun from the car and aimed at the boar king, determined to avenge her dead family members. But even after firing several shots, the boar still wasn't dead. Finally, Debbie fired over 200 shots to kill the boar king. Still shaken, the three hurriedly drove away, and not far down the road, they encountered Bernie, who was badly injured. Bart, who had been carried off by the boar king, was also alive. It turned out the boar king had only taken them back to its lair, planning to save them for the winter. At this moment, everyone's faces lit up with long-lost smiles. Not long after, a young couple drove into the wilderness and accidentally ran over a small boar. Suddenly, a group of boars appeared, seemingly frightened, and they scattered wildly. Then their car was hit and sent flying by an unknown giant creature. It turned out that just after Bernie and the others had driven away, a 2-ton boar king had appeared.